Once we had made a sufficiently large opening, we stood before a golden wall. This wall revealed itself to be a richly decorated shrine, gilded all over, and around it in the chamber, there was just enough room to edge our way through. The four walls of the chamber were decorated with wall paintings. We recognized among the scenes a funeral procession to the tomb, the king himself, and some deities of the afterlife. After opening the shrine, I discovered inside it a second shrine. And hanging over it like a starry sky was a cloth with gilded rosettes. We spread this cloth out on the floor outside so as to see it in its full extent. It was huge. So, inside the shrine, there was a second, somewhat smaller shrine. The seal on the door was intact. I could hardly suppress my excitement, for I now stood before the most sacred part of the tomb. And I knew that no tomb robbers had ever penetrated here. As I opened the shrine with trembling hands, I saw inside it a third shrine, and inside this one stood another. Everything gleamed with gold. Behind the doors of the fourth shrine, however, stood a stone sarcophagus. To be able to get inside it, we would first have to remove the four shrines.
The lack of space in the chamber made it almost impossible to move, and the recovery of the shrines was unimaginably difficult.
At first, it seemed a complete mystery to us how we were to dismantle and remove the individual shrines, which weighed up to 1,500 kilos, or 3,300 pounds, without damaging them. There were more than 80 individual pieces, and we needed 84 days of the heaviest physical labor before we had managed the task.
Every day brought more and more onlookers. As the news of the tomb's discovery had quickly spread around the world, the removal of the treasure soon turned into an exciting spectacle with an international audience. All the pieces first had to be conserved before they could be taken down to the Nile. Carter even had a rail track laid for transporting the larger pieces.
The number of our rails was so small, however, that we immediately had to take up the tracks behind the little wagon again so as to relay them in front of it. And all this in the blistering heat of Egypt.
Once the objects had reached the Nile, they were loaded onto a ship and taken to the museum in Cairo.
After the dismantling of the four shrines, the stone sarcophagus finally stood before us. Once we had carefully raised the lid with angle irons and pulleys, the interior was revealed. And there we discovered, under the remains of a darkly colored linen cloth, a wonderful gilded coffin. The first thing we did was lift out the gilded coffin using pulleys. When we had removed the lid of this coffin, a second, even more magnificent coffin was revealed. At first, we were unable to open the lid of this coffin. Once again, we had to install a specially elaborated system of pulleys, so as to lift this second coffin out of the first one. We were extremely surprised by the enormous weight of the coffin. We laid thick planks on the sarcophagus so that we could place the coffin on them.
When they finally managed to lift off the lid, which was firmly stuck to the bottom half with resins, they found a third coffin.
It was made of solid gold, and that was the reason for its enormous weight. We found desiccated flowers, and the thought that they had been lovingly laid in the tomb more than 3,000 years ago moved us deeply. And once more, the hands of pious priests had poured perfumed resins over everything, which in the course of the millennia had become black as pitch. In this heavy gold coffin lay the mummy of the pharaoh. with its head covered by an enigmatic golden mask. You can perhaps imagine what feelings had been running through me during those days and weeks. We forgot everything around us. The stifling air in the tomb, the heat and the sweat, the inexpressible effort, the exhausting work in the cramped chamber. But I was happy. Never before had anyone found such a completely preserved pharaoh's tomb. Never before had anyone been able to see such wonderfully crafted works of art as ours, which had been slumbering here for more than 3,000 years. My long search for this tomb, the many years of hoping and worrying, had all been worthwhile. Because with all this, our knowledge of ancient Egypt had been incredibly enriched.
Let's now move on to the third room, which is the treasury, and which opens directly off the burial chamber.
I dropped us.
A single glance was sufficient to show us what wonderful treasures were to be found in here. Opposite the entrance stood the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. So beautiful that I held my breath in amazement. It was a shrine-like chest, completely overlaid with gold and decorated at the top with a frieze of Uraeus snakes. These cobras are supposed to magically protect the shrine's contents, for it was without doubt the shrine that contained the canopic vessels, which is to say, the jars of miniature coffins with the inner organs of the king, which play such an important part of the embalming process because they are so absolutely necessary for life in the hereafter.
4 goddesses protect the shrine that holds the internal organs. Their names are Isis, Nephthys, Neith, and Selkit.
Directly by the entrance, like a mysterious garden on a gilded base and a sledge with long carrying poles, lay the black figure of the jackal-headed god Anubis. He leads the deceased into the underworld and protects them from all dangers. Behind Anubis, we recognize the head of the sacred cow Mehedweret, who is a symbol of the heavens and of the night in the hereafter.
On the right are a large number of black shrines with chests. Each contains one or more figures of either gods or kings, carefully stored in cloth wrappings. Most of them are covered in gold leaf.
A whole series of model ships was stacked on the black chests, without any discernible order, except that the prows were always aligned facing west, in the direction of the setting sun, towards the kingdom of the dead. We recognize the details, small cabins, kiosks, or thrones on their decks. They were boats such as the ones that were used in everyday life on the Nile in ancient Egypt. To the left of the Anubis figure lay some magnificent chests of ebony, decorated with gold and ivory. They contained valuable jewelry. Each one of these objects was minutely examined.
Get that side of it.
Now, if you're ready, we can move on to the second part of our exhibition, in which you
Not
can
ready.
see and marvel at the most beautiful and important objects from the tomb, piece by piece.
I'm just trying to get some pictures. No, don't go away.
Why do they do that?
Turn your light back on.
They should give everybody a chance to load. That's stupid.
It is what it is. They're all replicas. Let's go see. I know, baby. You'll be all right. It's okay. And we'll come back and go through the line again. But they turn the lights down. Well, oh, you could. Yep. Yep, you sure could. Just go join them. I don't hear anything anymore.
Oh. Well, we gotta put the number in.
As you'll remember, when Carter had removed the wall between the antechamber and the burial chamber, he found before him the golden, richly decorated wall of a wooden shrine. This was the largest of the 4 shrines, and we set it up for you here in the exhibition. To give you some idea of their relative sizes, we've set the shrine on a podium that has exactly the same measurements as the chamber, roughly 21 feet tall by 13 feet wide by 12 feet high.
A gap of about 26 inches separated the shrine from the walls on all 4 sides. On the floor all around the shrine, funerary goods had been placed for the journey into the hereafter.
Apart from their practical importance as protection for the deceased king, the shrines also have a deep religious and symbolic meaning. The outer shrine symbolizes a festival hall in which the king renews his rule from time to time. That is, his otherworldly heavenly rule, because even the powers of a ruler become exhausted after a while and have to be renewed. Every part of the outside of this festival hall is decorated, including the doors. Every detail has a significance and fits into an overall concept.
Have a look now into the interior of the shrine, where you can see the opened door. It is no coincidence that the series were
Some disc is hidden.
Because even though young Daniel under pressure,
As you'll remember, when Carter had removed the wall between the antechamber and the burial chamber, he found behind an open, richly decorated wall of a wooden shrine. This was the largest of the 4 shrines, and we set it up for you here in the exhibition. To give you some idea of its relative sizes, we've set the shrine on a podium that has exactly the same measurements as the chamber, roughly 21 feet tall by 13 feet wide by 12 feet high.
A gap of about 26 inches separated the shrine from the walls on all 4 sides. On the floor all around the shrine, funerary goods had been placed for the journey into the hereafter.
apart from their practical importance as protection for the deceased king, the shrines also have a deep religious and symbolic meaning. The outer shrine symbolizes a festival hall in which the king renews his rule from time to time. That is, his otherworldly, heavenly rule, because even the powers of a ruler become exhausted after a while and have to be renewed. Every part of the outside of this festival hall is decorated, including the doors. Every detail has a significance and fits into an overall concept.
Have a look now into the interior of the shrine. You can see the open door.
We stand here as we face the shrines before the greatest mystery ever revealed by the tomb of a pharaoh, the last resting place of the young pharaoh Tutankhamun, a fourfold casing that gives him protection. When we look at these great shrines, we can only wonder at the way they were built one inside the other, with a bigger shrine always around a smaller one. The winged sun disk over the entrances is reminiscent of the fact that the king has, in his tomb, been transformed into the sun.
The shrines are made of wood. The surfaces inside and outside were covered with a fine layer of plaster and then overlaid with gold leaf. These shrines are a magnificent testimony to the skill of the ancient Egyptian artists, and the two longer sides of the second shrine, which you are now standing in front of, show some of the most extraordinary scenes in Egyptian art.
The scenes depict secret divinities of the underworld. Most of the inscriptions are encrypted. Carter and his expert colleagues couldn't get to the bottom of these mysteries at the time of the discovery. And even today, there are still some details that haven't been decoded. Only priests and initiates knew these secrets of the afterlife over 3,000 years ago. They explain the regeneration of the sun's power and the magical mechanism of the resurrection of the king.
We'll be able to have a closer look at the second shrine later on. But for now, let's move on to the next shrine of the four. Counting from the outside to the inside, it's the third of the series in the tomb complex. With its sloping roof, this structure is built in imitation of an Upper Egyptian shrine. It contains the fourth and the last of the shrines. As you no doubt know, this innermost, fourth shrine in the burial chamber in the Valley of the Kings is where the sarcophagus lay. So let's now carry on to the sarcophagus.
At last, the great moment had arrived. Once we had dismantled the innermost shrine, the last one, the stone sarcophagus of the pharaoh stood before us. It was 2 3/4 meters, or about 9 feet in length, and 1.5 meters, or about 5 feet wide, hewn from a single block of yellow quartzite and covered by a granite slab weighing 600 kilograms, or more than 1,300 pounds as we later discovered. 4 winged goddesses at the 4 corners enveloped the pharaoh and gave him their protection.
Only several years after the discovery of the tomb did closer investigation establish that the sarcophagus had been remodeled at some point in ancient times before the burial of the pharaoh, because the goddesses had originally been wingless. Apparently, the sarcophagus was originally made for a completely different high-ranking person in the royal household, but was subsequently used for the burial of Tutankhamun.
15 is the discovery of the tomb. By the time we finally made the attempt to hoist up the enormously heavy granite sarcophagus, we had built a high scaffolding to which 2 hoists with 3 pulleys each were attached. I gave the signal. A profound silence reigned as the enormous slab lifted up off the sarcophagus. We saw a likeness of the boyish young king, made of gold and in splendid artistic execution. The gold ornamentation was as radiant as if it had just come out of the workshop. This golden image of the pharaoh was the lid of the first mummiform coffin, which completely filled the stone sarcophagus. Because of its size, we surmised that it was the outermost one of a series of coffins, the innermost of which enclosed the mortal remains of the king.
And that's how it was. There were 3 coffins, each one resting inside another. You see them now before you. As we set them up beside each other, each of them fitted precisely into the next.
These coffins are images of the sun's golden radiance, while at the same time being protective casings for the corpse, as well as imperishable substitute bodies. Each coffin lid shows an idealized image of the king. He is wrapped in a feathered robe, his brow adorned with a vulture and cobra, the heraldic goddesses of the 2 lands. in other words, Upper and Lower Egypt. In his crossed hands, he holds the pharaonic insignia of rule, the crook and flail. Nevertheless, the coffins differ from each other. On the gilded outer coffin, the king wears a tripartite wig under a headcloth. He's already depicted as a god here.
We even found withered flowers in the coffins, which had been given to the dead king more than 3,000 years ago for his journey into the afterlife, a parting gift from the young widow to her beloved husband. It was one of those moments that deeply moved us.
On the second coffin, the colored glass inlay seemed to reproduce the play of colors at sunrise, even though no ray of light could have penetrated the absolute darkness of the tomb during the 3,000 years that had passed.
But the innermost coffin is of breathtaking splendor. This exceptional coffin is 1 meter and 85 centimeters, or about 6 feet long, and made of solid gold. It weighs, as we later discovered, 110 kilograms, or more than 242 pounds. Its value in gold alone is enormous. Pure gold. This imperishable metal, from a mythological point of view, is the flesh of the sun god. We thus have here the body of the divine Sun King before us.
In October 1925, almost 3 years after the discovery of the tomb, the moment had arrived. Carter was to see the mummy of the pharaoh for the first time.
Hey. That's my good one, baby. Good one. Let's see the rest of that good girl, baby. Ornate building. They sent you off real good, baby. You know I want to touch it, make this all good. Let me go back to the plenary. I'm going to show you the sun wing discs. Do you see him?
Yeah.
And he has double snakes on his head. I need to find out who he is. I've seen the bull, but I don't know. I've never seen the lion. Got Sobek. Sobek. Got the whole gang on the boat. The whole gang on the boat. There go another lion. Oh, that is a baboon head. It's a baboon or a lion? I'm trying to get it. we got a. Man, that shit. The bottom of the feet. Bottom of the feet. This looks like tea. You hear me? This looks like tea. Queen, I'm telling you. I hope she's around
Oh,
here.
okay.
I got a few more minutes on my.
Well, you use my camera because you take better video.
It's tea.
Howard Carter opened the shrine. He discovered a chest made of alabaster with 4 wonderfully carved stone heads of the king. These also represent the 4 guardian gods of the internal organs. Inside them were 4 small mummy-shaped coffins. Each of the miniature coffins was made of gold. The outer casing was inlaid with cells of colored glass and precious stones, while the decorations on the inner casing were engraved. In these small coffins were the king's mummified organs, namely the lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines. Today we know that these small coffins were probably not originally made for Tutankhamun, because the inscriptions bearing the king's name were adapted after their manufacture. Covered about 150 amulets and other pieces of jewelry within the bandages of Tutankhamun's mummy alone. He found additional jewelry in some of the chests and boxes. From later mummies, we know that the amulets were placed over the body according to a fixed pattern in order to guarantee the magical protection of various body parts and
That
organs.
motherfucker had a gold head, baby.
Countless
How you gonna have
amulets,
a gold
collars, and
head,
pectorals
baby?
were strung around the neck in particular and secured with thin
That look like a
linen
gold
threads.
do-rag to me.
On the chest of the mummy, directly below the mask, lay 2 crossed hands made of polished gold plate holding royal insignia. The hands were sewn onto the mummy casing. A scarab beetle made from resin was embedded between them. Beneath this, a ba bird with a human head unfurls his wings. This ba rested in the body at night. He is the immortal and free-roaming part of the human soul. 4 horizontal strips and 1 vertical strip of sheet gold with inlaid text mimic the bindings with which the shroud was fixed to the mummy. After the precious overlays had been lifted free from the wrapped mummy, the bandages could be removed layer by layer, which revealed countless amulets and other jewelry. On the chest there lay several necklaces in the shape of vultures, falcons, and cobras, as well as heavy pendants, one on top of the other. bracelets encased the forearms and then throws.